My mother handed me a folded piece of paper across the dinner table on Thanksgiving, the one holiday I actually showed up for, and smiled like she was giving me a gift. It was an invoice. Itemized. 31 years of expenses, typed in 12-point Times New Roman, totaling $318,000. I sat there reading it twice because I genuinely thought I was misunderstanding something. Food, clothing, school supplies, extracurricular activities. A line item for emotional labor estimated. Another for household inconvenience during adolescence. My father was watching me from across the table. My younger brother was looking at his plate. My sister-in-law had suddenly found something very interesting to study on her phone. "We think it's fair," my mother said. "Given everything." I folded the paper back along its crease and set it next to my fork. I said, "I need some air," and I walked out the front door into the cold November dark, and I stood on the porch for a long time, breathing. That was 8 months ago. I want to tell you what happened, all of it. I grew up in a medium-sized house in Ohio with 2 parents who were not bad people in obvious ways. They didn't drink. They didn't hit us. We had dinner together most nights. From the outside, we were a perfectly average family, which I think made it harder to name what was actually wrong for a very long time. What was wrong was this. My brother Cody could do no wrong, and I could do no right. It wasn't dramatic. It was just the water we swam in. When Cody forgot to mow the lawn, it was because he was busy with baseball. When I forgot to set the table, it was because I was irresponsible. When Cody dropped out of his first semester of college, my parents rallied around him, gave him time, gave him money, told him he'd figure it out. When I got a full academic scholarship to study accounting at a state university 4 hours away, my mother cried, not happy tears, and said she didn't know why I always had to go so far. I paid for my own apartment. I worked part-time all 4 years. I graduated with a 3.8 GPA and no debt. And my parents came to the ceremony and left early because my father's back was bothering him. None of this felt catastrophic at the time. That's the thing about this kind of family. You normalize it as you go. You tell yourself it's not that bad. You compare yourself to people with real problems and feel guilty for even noticing. The person who noticed first, actually named it out loud, was my grandmother. My father's mother. Her name was Opal, and she was the sharpest woman I have ever known. Opal lived alone in a farmhouse outside of Columbus that she'd been in for 50 years. She'd outlived her husband by 15 years and showed absolutely no signs of slowing down. She had opinions about everything: politics, architecture, the correct way to make biscuits, and she expressed them freely and without apology, which as a child I found terrifying, and as an adult I found revelatory. I started driving out to see her on my own when I was about 24, not because anyone asked me to, just because I liked her. She made good coffee, she had a porch that faced west, and the sunsets were something. "Your mother has never liked you," she told me once, without any particular cruelty, the way you'd point out that a plant needs more water. "I don't mean she doesn't love you. I mean she doesn't like you. You remind her of things about herself she'd rather not see." I didn't know what to say to that. "I'm telling you," Opal said, "because it's useful information. It means her opinion of you is about her, not you." I drove home that day and sat in my car in my apartment parking lot for about 20 minutes, not crying exactly, but doing something adjacent to it. Over the next several years, Opal and I developed a rhythm. I came out once or twice a month. I helped her with things she'd never have asked my father for: a leaking faucet, the winter storm windows, the year her hip was bad and she couldn't manage the grocery run. She taught me to make her pie crust. We watched old movies and argued about them. She told me things about my father's childhood that helped me understand him a little better, though not enough to excuse him. My parents knew I visited. They never asked about it. Cody had been to Opal's house maybe 3 times in 10 years. When Opal was diagnosed with congestive heart failure at 81, I started going every week. I talked to her doctors. I helped her fill out the medical paperwork she found confusing and humiliating. I drove her to appointments, I stayed over on nights when she said she felt unsteady, sleeping on the pull-out couch in her spare room that smelled like cedar and old quilts. My parents visited twice in 14 months. I'm not saying this to earn points. I'm saying it because it becomes relevant. Opal died in March, on a Tuesday morning with her hands folded on top of the blanket and the window open, because she'd always said she wanted to hear the birds. I was there. I held her hand. It was the most sacred and devastating thing I have ever witnessed. And I drove home afterward and didn't speak to anyone for 3 days. My father called on the 4th day to discuss the estate. Opal's house was old, but the land had become valuable. There was also a savings account, some investments she'd managed quietly and well over the decades. My father had always assumed, had never actually verified, just assumed that as the only child, he would inherit everything. The reading of the will was at a lawyer's office downtown. Small room, wood-paneled, slightly too warm. My parents were there. Cody was there. The lawyer, a quiet man with reading glasses, read the document in a flat professional voice. Opal had left my father and Cody modest amounts. Enough to feel considered. She had left me the farmhouse and the majority of her estate. There was a letter included, addressed to me, which the lawyer handed over in a sealed envelope. My parents were staring at me. My father's jaw had gone tight. My mother looked like she was calculating. I put the envelope in my bag. I read it alone that night, in my car in my own driveway because I couldn't wait to get inside. You already know why, Opal wrote. Her handwriting was loose and slightly tilted, the way it got in her last years. You showed up. That's the whole of it. I have watched this family for a long time, and I want you to know I see you clearly. You are not what they say you are. You are exactly what I see. I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I started the car and drove home. The months after Opal's death were complicated. My father didn't speak to me for 6 weeks after the will reading. When he did call, it was to tell me I should do the right thing and sign the house over to him, since it was the family property and that's how these things should work. I told him I'd think about it. I did think about it. I thought about 50 years of Opal living in that house alone after her husband died. I thought about the winter I shoveled her driveway every week. I thought about the reading glasses she wore when we did crossword puzzles together on Sunday afternoons. I told my father I wasn't signing anything over. He told me I was selfish. I thanked him for his input. We hung up. Meanwhile, I was quietly figuring out what to do with the property. I didn't want to sell it immediately. It felt too soon, too final. I decided to rent it out for a year while I made a longer plan. I found good tenants, a young couple, and the rental income was enough to cover the property taxes and then some. My mother called occasionally during this period. The calls were short and strange. She'd ask surface questions about my life, and then pivot without transition into comments about how hard she and my father had worked, how much they'd sacrificed, how difficult the years of raising us had been. I listened. I said things like, I understand, and that sounds hard. I didn't argue. Then came Thanksgiving. I almost didn't go. My best friend Lydia, who has known me since college and has always been clearer-eyed about my family than I am, told me flatly that I should skip it. You're not going to get what you're looking for there, she said. You never have. Why keep going back? Because they're my parents, I told her. Because maybe this year is different. Because I still, after everything, had this faint irrational hope that I would walk in and there would just be a regular holiday. So I went. I made a sweet potato dish. I brought wine. I hugged my mother at the door. We got through the meal. It was almost normal. Cody was there with his girlfriend. We talked about nothing in particular. My father carved the turkey the way he always did, with too much ceremony. I thought, for about 45 minutes, that Lydia had been wrong. Then my mother cleared the plates and came back from the kitchen and sat down and she said, "We need to talk about something as a family." The folded paper appeared. My mother talked for several minutes. About sacrifice. About the cost of raising children. About how they'd done everything for us and gotten nothing in return. She mentioned the inheritance specifically, said it was deeply unfair, said Opal hadn't been in her right mind, said I had manipulated an old woman into changing her will. That last part landed like a slap. I didn't ask her for anything, I said. I was very calm, which surprised me. You were over there constantly, my mother said. You made her depend on you. I was helping her. She was sick. You were positioning yourself. I looked at my father. He was looking at the table. I looked at Cody. He gave me a small, apologetic shrug. The kind that means I knew this was coming and I didn't warn you, and I'm sorry but not sorry enough to have done anything differently. I picked up the invoice. I read it again, top to bottom. $318,000. I noticed they had not subtracted the amount I had contributed to household expenses the 2 summers I'd lived at home during college breaks. I noticed they had not subtracted the birthday money I'd never received after age 12. Because my mother said I was old enough not to need it. I noticed they had not subtracted the car I had bought entirely with my own money, at 22, that my father had once casually referred to as the car we got you. A revision of history so complete, it had briefly made me doubt my own memory. I set the paper down. No, I said. My mother blinked. Excuse me? No, I'm not paying this. This isn't a debt. You chose to have children. I didn't ask to be born into this family, and raising me was your legal and moral responsibility, not a loan I owe you interest on. My mother started to speak. I'm not finished, I said, and something in my voice made her stop. I am grateful for what I had. I didn't go without food or shelter. But gratitude is not the same as a debt. And the fact that you sat down and itemized my childhood into a spreadsheet tells me everything I need to know about how you've always seen me. The table was very quiet. I'm going to leave now, I said. I hope you have a good rest of your holiday. I put on my coat. I took my bag. I walked to the door. My mother said my name once, sharp, in the tone she used when I was 12, and she wanted me to come back and apologize for something. I kept walking. I sat in my car in their driveway for a moment. My hands were on the steering wheel. I noticed they were perfectly steady, which struck me as strange, because I felt like I had just walked through a fire. Then I drove away. I called Lydia from the highway. She answered on the second ring. How bad? She said. I told her. There was a long pause. You left, she said. I told her. There was a long pause. You left, she said. I left. Good, she said. Come over. I have leftover pie. I spent the rest of Thanksgiving at Lydia's apartment eating her roommate's pecan pie and watching a movie I couldn't follow because my mind kept circling back to the invoice. The itemized line for emotional labor. The careful, deliberate act of turning a childhood into a transaction. That night I called the only other person I needed to tell. My therapist, in a voicemail, because her office was closed for the holiday. I said, I think something shifted tonight. I think I might be done. I said I'd explain Thursday. I drove home. I fed my cat. I got into bed. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my mother, then 2 from my father, then 1 from Cody, which was unusual enough that I almost called back, but I didn't. I put the phone face down on my nightstand and turned off the light. I slept better than I had in months. In the days that followed, I did not reach out. I also, for the first time in my adult life, did not feel guilty about not reaching out. My mother called twice the next day. My father once. A text from my father arrived on Saturday that said, "We'd like to talk when you're ready." I read it. I didn't respond. I met with my therapist on Thursday. We'd been working together for 2 years at that point, mostly on things I'd labeled vaguely as family stress and difficulty with boundaries, which, in retrospect, were very polite ways of describing what was actually happening. I told her about Thanksgiving in detail. She listened without interrupting, which she is very good at. How did you feel when you left? She asked. Steady, I said, which was confusing. Why confusing? Because I thought I'd feel worse. Guilty. Scared of what came next. What did you feel instead? I thought about it. Like I'd put something down that I'd been carrying for a long time without realizing how heavy it was. She nodded. We talked for the rest of the hour about what came next. Practically speaking, whether I wanted to respond to my parents at all, what kind of contact, if any, felt acceptable to me, what I actually wanted versus what I thought I was supposed to want. It was the most useful 50 minutes I'd spent in a while. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I received a certified letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. I opened it at my kitchen table with my coffee and read it twice. My parents, the letter informed me, were consulting legal counsel regarding the matter of Opal's estate. They believed the will had been executed under undue influence. They were requesting I voluntarily relinquish my inheritance and enter mediation. I sat with this for a moment. Then I called my own lawyer. I had a woman named from my work in contract accounting, someone I'd used twice for business matters. I forwarded her the letter. She called me back within the hour. This is not a strong case, she said. Undue influence requires specific legal criteria. Being present during someone's illness and forming a close relationship does not meet that bar, especially with no evidence that your grandmother was cognitively impaired, which from what you've told me, she was not. She was sharp until the last month, I said. Right. So this is a pressure tactic, most likely, designed to make you feel like you're on shaky legal ground when you're not. What do you recommend? Respond through me, not directly. Keep all communication documented, and don't sign anything. I thanked her. I felt something settle in my chest. I responded to my parents through my lawyer. The letter was brief and professional, and said nothing they probably wanted to hear. The legal inquiry went nowhere. I don't know exactly when they dropped it, because I wasn't following it closely. My lawyer handled it. She told me when it was resolved. That's it, I said. That's it, she said. By spring, I had made my decision about the farmhouse. I wasn't going to sell it. I was going to keep it. I gave my apartment notice. I arranged to work remotely. My firm was flexible. The pandemic years had made that easier. And in April, I drove out to the farmhouse, with my cat in a carrier in the passenger seat and a carload of my things. It was strange, walking into Opal's house as mine. Her furniture was still there. Most of it, the tenants had used their own things and left Opal's in storage in the barn. A practical kindness I was grateful for. I walked through the room slowly, touching things. The kitchen table she'd had for 40 years. The bookshelf in the hallway. The porch where we'd watched sunsets. I sat down in her chair. The good one, the one she always sat in. And I looked out the west-facing window, and the light was doing something extraordinary with the clouds. And I thought, I am supposed to be here. I earned this, not through anything ruthless, just by showing up. I called Lydia that evening. I'm in, I said. In the house? In the house. In the house. It's mine. I'm staying. She made a noise of pure satisfaction. Tell me everything. My parents called 53 times over the course of April. I counted. I'm an accountant. Counting things is what I do. I did not answer most of them. I let some go to voicemail. The voicemails were variations on a theme: hurt, accusatory, occasionally conciliatory, always circling back to the house and the inheritance and what they were owed. My father left one that was just 4 minutes of silence, which I found more unsettling than anything he'd said with words. My mother left one on a Tuesday afternoon that was mostly crying, and I listened to it twice. And I felt sad in a complicated way that had nothing to do with changing my mind. Cody texted once. He said, I don't really agree with how they handled things. For what it's worth. I wrote back, it's worth something. Thank you. We haven't spoken much since, but that exchange mattered to me more than he probably knows. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years reached out on social media. She'd heard something from my mother, a version of events heavily edited in my mother's favor, and wrote to ask if I was doing okay. I replied that I was well, thanked her, and left it there. I've been in the farmhouse for several months now. The summer here is something I wasn't prepared for. The way the fields go golden in the late afternoon, the sound at night that's so different from the apartment I lived in for 7 years. My cat has discovered a particular windowsill that she treats as a full-time occupation. I fixed the back gate myself with a YouTube tutorial and more time than strictly necessary. I planted tomatoes. 3 of them are doing well. I think about Opal a lot. I think about the letter she left me, which I've read so many times the fold lines are starting to wear through. You showed up. That's the whole of it. I think about what it means to show up for people. It's not complicated, actually. It's not grand. It's just being there. Consistently. Without a ledger. My parents have stopped calling as frequently. The last voicemail came 3 weeks ago. My mother's voice was quieter than usual. She said she hoped I was well. She said she missed me. She didn't mention the money. I haven't called back yet. I'm still figuring out what, if anything, I want to say. My therapist says there's no deadline. She says I'm allowed to take the time I need. I think what I want to say, when I'm ready, is something like, I love you, and I am not coming back to the version of our relationship where my value was conditional. If you want a different kind of relationship, I'm open to that. But I need you to understand that the invoice doesn't exist. It never did. Raising a child is not a transaction. Loving someone is not a transaction. And I spent 31 years trying to pay a debt I was never supposed to owe, and I am done. I don't know if I'll get to say that. I don't know if they're capable of hearing it. But I know this. I'm sitting on Opal's porch right now, writing this, and the sun is going down in a way that makes the whole western sky look like it's on fire, and the tomatoes are doing well, and my cat is somewhere inside, probably on her windowsill, and the house is quiet in the particular way that means it's mine. I used to think stability was something my family was supposed to give me. It turns out I had to build it myself. But it's built, and nobody is taking it.